Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the League of Logic podcast, a podcast when you can learn how to think for yourself. We're glad you're tuning in. Before we get started in today's conversation, we would like to ask you to check out our website, leagueoflogic.com. That's leagueoflogic.com. On that website, you can find some study tools and some resources to help you along this journey in the search for truth. It's getting a little bit harder day by day. Also on that website, we have a Contact Us page. We'd love to hear from you guys. Send us some questions, some comments, review, give us some feedback on what we've been talking about lately. Also, we're on all the social media platforms, Facebook and X and Truth Social. We're also on Rumble and YouTube. So check out those videos. Give us a like, a share, a subscribe, whatever you got to do to keep up with the channel and help us get the word out would be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, folks, sit back and relax and get ready for another conversation about truth. What's happening, folks? What's happening, gentlemen? How are y'all today?
Good.
It's a glorious day. The weather's making a shift. I hope it's permanent and not false fall, right?
It's probably false fall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually is.
I heard a weatherman say, though, that this time it won't going to be false fall. There's supposed to be like some cold front coming next week, too. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, it's supposed to be like 70, high 70s for the high. That'd be awesome. I don't know. I'm enjoying 50, 60 degrees in the morning when you get up and get out.
Yeah, it's a blessing after what we've had.
Real. Did y'all stay busy this week or did you do nothing?
Always busy.
I'm a pastor, so I did absolutely nothing.
I have no real job. I get it.
I've got no real job. Exactly.
Yeah, my boss is a jerk. I did some things this way. I had no choice. Yeah, it's a shame you come back off long trips like that and you know that you're about to fall back into the rut and the pattern of your normal life in America and you don't want to do it. I mean, you recognize that. You know that's going to happen, but I don't want it to happen, and yet it's happening anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know how you avoid that because unfortunately, the bills still have to be paid. One of our less than 2 million viewers, if they ever want to just take on a family or three, yeah. Anyway,
Set up a GoFundMe.
Yeah.
That's something. What does it go? What it give, send, go?
Yeah, give, send, go.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, we got a different topic this morning. We hinted at it a little bit. And, I mean, just right off the bat, I'm not a history guy, so it's going to be way heavy on both of you. But it would be interesting or it'd probably be more important that the first thing we do is get our minds right so that we could start thinking.
All right.
So let me just ask you guys, like, how many toes do you have on your left foot and which one's your favorite?
I'm not going to answer that question because if I have more or less than 5, y'all might think of me.
I judge.
Yeah.
You brush your teeth with your left hand or your right hand? Is your brain working? Yes. Yeah, so we're good. Can we move on? Now, what we got is
Lord.
we talk.
Lord help him.
I know. I'm sorry.
And those like him.
I apologize for that right there. No. Sometimes though in life, I use this all the time, even when we're talking about evangelism and stuff, and you use current events and things. In order to get a point across to some people, you have to use the ridiculous to point out what you're serious, what you're talking about. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Because you don't always recognize how dumb a position or things that we're doing are until you get something out that it's really ridiculous. And ultimately it's the same principle that you're trying to apply. And you're just like, oh yeah, that is kind of dumb. But, we do a whole lot of current events, and particularly, I guess there's really no question on how we feel about government and its limits and stuff. And so I guess today, what are we talking about? The Mayflower Compact and what that all involved, as our country is beginning to be shaped and formed and made into what it is today. And again, I don't know a lot about history.
But Chris does.
Chris does that. That's why we brought the professional in
That's right.
again.
I know about the Bible. I don't know a whole lot always about history. I do know this though. I just thought of this. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge." Now, this is a reason that you should know at least some history.
Yeah.
It's a reason that we should study history and understand what's going on. How, if we're to be good citizens of this nation, we need to understand how this nation came about, for what purposes, and
Take
because
away.
those purposes carry through to us.
On what principles? Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't make the same mistakes. Learn from those things.
absolutely.
Don't repeat them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it is not a joke that I am not good at history. I was terrible, but I didn't have any interest in it. But now that I'm older, I sure do wish I'd have paid attention a lot more.
Sure.
It's almost like I'm having to relearn it all now.
There's a reason they want to remove statues and,
Mm-hmm.
and history from schools and rewrite it, right?
Yeah. If they can eliminate your knowledge, simple-minded people are easily manipulated.
Oh man, say that loud for the people in the back. That is true.
Absolutely. You won't. Look, now we're going to dive on in. And there's a reason that the Catholic Church didn't want people to read their Bibles. There's a reason, and we'll probably get into that. But there's a reason that those things were written in Latin, and only the priests and things like that could read it. Because if those parishioners couldn't read it for themselves, that limits their knowledge. That makes them more easily manipulated.
Yep.
People today want you to not know your history in this nation because they want to continue to manipulate it.
To the point of, might as well go ahead and go there. These priests would read, it was Latin is what they read from, and they would read it in Latin. So the people sitting in church didn't even understand what he was saying to start with. They had no idea. So it all came down to the priest's interpretation of what it was.
Sure did give him
He could make up anything he wanted
well,
to.
it sure did give him this impression to the people of someone who was of great knowledge and authority, and so trust this guy because the way he talks, just does that make sense?
Yes.
Total dependence upon him.
But can you imagine going to church? I guess mass then, but going to church every Sunday, not being able to read the Bible, and then listening to Chris read it in Latin, not knowing a single word in Latin. What do you walk away with?
Whatever he says.
Whatever
he says.
Yeah.
And how often are you want to go back and listen to that? Don't you want to know? Even the simple-minded would want to know. Well, why can't I read it for myself? And that's where we're at with the Mayflower Compact.
Just to keep the simple. We had made a T-shirt about that, even for the simple. And I would tell you that ain't changed a lot, even sometimes here in America, because there are some that are going to talk in English above your head just for the sole purpose of making themselves seem knowledgeable.
Yep.
And to maintain your simpleness rather than trying to help your simpleness. These guys, so I don't know what year was all this about starting. I know the actual compact was written 1620. I wrote that down so I wouldn't forget. But it began way before that. Several years.
You talking about like
what led up to the point where these guys are on this boat to write this compact? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that little bit of history is important on how they got to where they were.
So the Church of England was the problem. There was people that were concerned and in opposition to pretty much like state interference with church matters, religious matters. Church and state were wedded together in England, just like church and state were wedded together under Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. And even though there was this Reformation that had taken place, a lot of Christians didn't feel like the Church of England had broken away far enough. And this is really their issue with that is really where the idea of separation of church and state come from. The state does not need to be able to interfere in religious matters. Like one of the problems was that the church assigned everyone certain churches to go to. If you were in this area, you went to this certain church, but that certain church was not autonomous. They were under the headship of a larger church, and then that church was under the greater authority of the Church of England, which was under the authority of the king. That's state. Then there was other practical problems, like the Church of England still had like set written prayers that they would go by. They still believed in like baptismal regeneration, that you had to be baptized. You were not regenerate. Baptism regenerated you, not just a symbol that you had been regenerated. They required communion to be taken a certain number of times a year in order to retain membership and retain salvation in that sense too. So that it's very works related. So the Puritans didn't agree with any of that, and they opposed those practices, and they wanted to reform the church. And this is many, many years before. This is during Reformation. This is during Luther,
Calvin,
and all them, 1500s. So they wanted to reform. So they tried to stay in it and reform and purify it from within. That's why they were called Puritans. Then there came a time where some of them said, "This ain't gonna work. We need to separate ourselves." They became the separatists, and then their names would become Pilgrims as well. And they believed that like-minded believers should be able to seek out other like-minded believers and form churches for themselves under the authority and headship of Christ and the Holy Spirit. And
that's a novel idea.
It is.
Where did that come from?
It must have came from the Bible. and the Lord added to the church daily as many as should be saved. But
good thing that old King James wrote it in English for them then.
They didn't. Yeah, exactly. I don't think King James saw this coming in 1611 when he wrote this, but those separatists emphasized the right and responsibility for each congregation to determine its own affairs without having state interference, or to submit to the direction and judgment of higher human authority. They wanted church autonomy under Christ, and that's where it started.
So you already answered my first question I had. That was, what was the difference between the Puritans and the Separatists? So the Puritan guys were there. Let me get it right. So they were there trying to do it from the inside.
All separatists were Puritan.
Okay.
Were Puritans.
They were also called Lordies, I think.
Lordies?
That's another name for them, yeah. Which was slander, basically.
Oh, I see. Like Christian nationalists.
Yes, that kind of thing.
Yes, there it is.
that kind of, yeah. I get just a little, to back up a little bit more, that fight had gotten really ugly in England because King Henry, we've already talked about this on the podcast. You can go back and find it. But King Henry went to the Pope because he wanted to marry another woman, divorce his wife, and the Pope wouldn't allow it. So Henry ended up taking over the Church of England, control of it, so he could divorce his wife and marry somebody else. It kind of went back and forth, and then along comes Queen Mary, which you can look this history up for yourself. And she said that she would not take over the church again and that she wouldn't outlaw Christianity, but the reason she's called Bloody Mary is because she killed all the Christians. And part of that was during a time when these Puritans felt that they should be able to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and not through the Pope. And they wanted Bibles written in English, translated in English. And that's where the King James Bible came from, and the Geneva Bible, which came out before King James. But the notes inside of the Geneva Bible really tell the tale of where they were and where the church was, and the tyranny of Catholicism over those people. It's they were under a lot of pressure. I mean, all they wanted to do was be able to read a Bible, have a Bible in their own home, in their own hands, and it was like war to make that happen.
So now these Puritan and these separatist folks, as they're trying to pull away or separate from the church that's ruled by the king, or by the state, were they in like danger of getting in trouble, like being disobedient to their government? Does that make sense? Like,
absolutely. But I'm not so sure that at that time it went back and forth. And Chris, you might be able to say better, but it it wasn't so much that the government had control over the church as the church had control over the people. That kind of went back and forth as far as the connection between the church and state.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that connection may be the king enforcing the rule that the Roman Catholic Church had over the people.
I see.
You get what I'm saying? So they kind of worked hand in hand that way. But
That actually sort of goes along with one of the history lessons I heard one time in Brazil, that the Catholic Church came about because the church had such an influence on the people that Satan says, hey, I'm going to whisper in this guy's ear to set up your own church, call yourself Christians, and then we can control the people through their religion.
Yeah.
Mm.
How about that?
Yeah, because
they don't write that down in history books, though, because it's got too much spiritual warfare in it.
I think the Pilgrims that come over on the Mayflower, they were still loyal to the king, but they were in rebellion against the Catholic Church.
I see.
Or
makes sense.
Yeah, the Church of England.
Yeah,
the Church of England,
which is pretty much Catholic still.
So that was the other question I had. I found a little picture thing. What was the difference between the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England? Was there a difference, or were they the same? That, from what I could tell, they were a little bit different.
Yeah, the structure's the same though. You've got, well, in the Catholic Church, you got like you got a little picture there, but you got the Pope is the head and he's the authority, and then the Pope has authority over all the people. During the early Roman Catholicism, when the church and state were wedded together, somebody like Constantine was both emperor and pope pretty much at the same time. And that's kind of how the Church of England was. The king was pretty much like the pope. He was the head of the church. He's head of both church and state. And that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The Puritans didn't like that. They were trying to purify that and reform it. And sooner or later, the separatists some Puritans say, hey, we can't, this ain't going to work, so we need to do something else. And I think it raises a good question. Were the separatists wrong in giving up on the Church of England? Well, I think if you look at history, and we got America sitting here, I guess they made a good choice. Yep. Were the Puritans wrong? Those Puritans that stayed to try to reform, were they wrong? No, I think everybody's got a different call of God, and there is a time to stay and to fight and to try to reform a church or a denomination or something like that. And then there's time to cut ties and
follow God.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I just don't know. I think it's different for every person.
Yep. It goes back to Romans 13 again.
Well, yeah, it does.
It does.
But I want to be clear about something. They didn't separate. Those separatists didn't separate from the church simply because they wanted to worship God whatever way they wanted to. Right. It's not that type of license to do whatever they wanted to. They separated because they loved and honored God, and they wanted to worship Him as the authoritative head that He was supposed to be. And they could not do that when the church and the state had usurped that authority.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
They had usurped the authority of God as the head, and that was their main issue.
Absolutely.
But the problem is when you separate from a church that is yoked up with the state, that makes it illegal.
Right. That's what I was getting at. How much trouble would they have gotten into? So the separatist part of them, I guess then the Puritans, they could still interact with, quote, the state-run church because they hadn't totally rebelled. They were just trying to make everything. But these separatist guys, they were flat out, we're out. We're going to do it our way. Well, we'll do it the Bible way, I guess that's a better way of saying it. We're going to worship God the way He says to in the Bible. We want to be able to follow the Bible. So what did they do? Where'd they go? How did they get away from the king and all that state stuff?
Most of them went to Holland. Holland was more accepting of their practice of trying to have congregational churches, so they kind of fled to Holland. And then from there decided we need to get maybe as far away from this as we can. There's this new place over here. Let's go try that.
So the Holland was across was it a bay or what is it? Is it a bay or a sea? I don't know. It's a little body of water, but it ain't quite as big as what we got between us and them, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was a body of water between them, but it wasn't like an ocean.
Right.
Leiden in the city of Dutch Republic.
Leiden, yeah.
So to get over there, And so tell me about, this is where I start to get all fuzzy. So these guys are getting ready to take off and come to America. They've been in Holland for a while trying to do their thing there, but they realizing it ain't going to work out like they wanted to. I imagine they were still getting some pressure from the king. So people had to know.
Yeah, they are. I mean, for lack of a better word, they are both religious and political refugees.
Yeah. And so they get ready, and they're gonna go to America to resettle because they see this is a land of opportunity or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, but then the Puritans that are still in England, somehow or another, they work to deal with the king to get permission or somebody to be able to go and have a settlement. Is that how that worked?
In Virginia, yeah.
In Virginia?
I mean, there was already there was people.
The colony of Virginia was already there.
Yeah, there was people already here.
So I guess let me just ask it a different way. So how then did you, if at that point in time over here in America, Virginia, and all these places, they were still quote owned by the king, owned by England? Is that? I mean, I'm not exactly that way, but they all had to have almost like a deed to be able to go and settle an area.
I guess so. But you got to realize that it's not just pilgrims that are on the Mayflower.
Uh-huh.
They had merchants and things like that, so they were able to work it out in that way. It's not just religious and political refugees that are coming over here.
Uh-huh.
Hey, we're going to start an English nation or English settlement over here, and you could get I guess you could say that the king was a little bit more accepting of that because it expands his kingdom in doing that, especially because they were still loyal to the king. You can read that in the language of the Mayflower Compact. They were still loyal to the king. They just didn't like the way the church was set up.
If what you're asking, it was the Company of Merchant Adventures of London.
Yeah, yeah.
Who they contracted with,
Uh-huh.
right? And they would have supposed to be 2 ships.
Right.
That were going out.
I saw that.
And head to the colony of Virginia.
Uh-huh.
It ended up being 1, and I don't remember why.
Because that other one had a whole bunch of leaks in it. They tried 3 times to get to the ocean.
Right.
It kept taking on water, so they declared it unworthy of sea. No.
I would say so.
And so they left it.
Yeah. So it ended up being 1, but that was basically a contract. I don't know if
That's what I'm getting at. That contract, because everybody harps on that. You know, the guys came over and they broke the contract. You know, whatever. And so before I get to that point, though, I wanted to know, what did the contract do?
Who broke the contract?
Well, so people will tell you that the 102 people, or the people who set up the Mayflower Compact, broke the contract with the.
some of them said that. I don't think all of them did.
Well, not all of them. I'm not talking about people on the boat. I'm talking about people today that are going to contest the importance of the Mayflower Compact as a founding root for our way our government should be run. They will tell you can't base the way our government should be run on the Mayflower Compact because these guys were a bunch of law-breaking morons.
Oh, I get what
you see what I'm saying?
Yes. No, it was quite the opposite.
I understand. I understand that, but that's where I'm getting it. It's my line of questioning, but now I'll give it away.
I wouldn't say the Mayflower voyagers broke any kind of contract at all. I think they were holding to the contract. The ones that broke the contract was them dudes in 1776.
Right.
They broke the contract, but it needed to be broken.
I think what you're looking for is they had the contract, the terms of the contract.
Yeah.
Was held through the colony of Virginia, right? That's where they were supposed to go.
And then they were supposed to live and work, and this trade back and forth was supposed to be profitable for the people that were giving them the money to get there. Is that
right? And if you go through Ancestry, you'll find, if you've ever done that, you'll find a lot of people got to other countries that way. They would either it was service to themselves or service to a merchant ship or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that contract was through, was Virginia. But they got caught in storms and ended up in Massachusetts.
Right.
And there was no way to get to Virginia. So that is what broke the contract.
Right. And that's what I was getting at. So what was the agreement that they had with the merchants and the people on the Mayflower? And it was, you're going to go over there and you're going to go to work and we're going to have a trade deal. And this is how the company who gave us the money to be able to get there in the first place is going to make profit off this agreement.
Right. But the company couldn't get them to Virginia.
It couldn't get them to Virginia.
So you really don't have anything. You're on your own at that point.
And so why couldn't they get to Virginia?
Because they landed in the Mayflower landed in Massachusetts because of storms. So
yeah,
that was it.
And I even think they made an effort once they got there. from what I could tell from what I looked up prior to writing the actual compact, they said, we're in the wrong spot. Let's head, what is it, south?
Yes.
But they didn't want to get too far away from land because they'd already been through all the storms. And as they're down, like, man, this is too dangerous. We can't do it. We got to turn around and come back.
Yep.
It won't like they didn't make the effort.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there was a little bit of infighting in that. Whole deal.
Well, and the infighting in it is where the compact actually came from.
Exactly, because they knew it was going to get out of control.
Right. All right. So now we've made it there. So there's the history. That was good. Y'all teaching me something, clarifying it at least anyway. I'm telling you, I can't even hardly study history, right? Because my brain just doesn't engage with it like it does math.
We're here to keep you from perishing from a lack of knowledge.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. His questions are great. And so, so what caused it then? What caused them to write the compact? Why did they even decide they needed to write a compact or an agreement? Let's call it even a covenant if you want to.
For law and order, and the majority agreed upon it. But you have to also, I think what you're talking about, people are saying they were unlawful, but they really did this thing in alliance to the king.
Oh, yes, I agree.
Absolutely. They were not defying the king at all. That's
well,
important to understand that's
it really is. It's a great point. And the reason I bring those things up are so people can get that point, because I like to look at it from people who don't believe the same way I do, so I don't end up, in this echo chamber of belief. How do you defend what you believe if you never hear what somebody else has to say about it, right? And that was one of their biggest things, where they broke the law. They broke the contract they had with the merchants. And so
it's even in it's written in there. I'm sure one of y'all is going to read it, but it's even written in there. They were trying to be,
loyal to the king.
Yeah. Most of their, I don't know. I think it's important we read Romans 13 and look at the notes, what these people believed, and it comes out in the Geneva Bible.
So even this argument these people are having in our time now about why we should not put any weight on the Mayflower Compact is the same argument that people on the Mayflower were having as they're trying to decide whether or not they should go to Virginia or just settle there in Massachusetts. It's like, are we breaking our covenant with the merchant ship or not? Are we breaking this contract? And so in order to make sure that they were still following rules and laws and agreements, that's why they started writing it.
If they even could make it to Virginia.
If they could even make it there. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So what is the Mayflower Compact was actually a solution to that problem. It wasn't a rebellious thing they did to get out of an agreement with the merchants.
No, it was to partner with them,
right?
To be able to make things work with them.
That's my whole point. These people saying that you can't put weight on it, there's actually this the opposite. You can actually put more weight on it because they were trying their best to honor an agreement that they had no physical way of keeping.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, how many? There was like 41 signers to the Mayflower Compact. Yep. 102 people.
102 people. They were families.
Which
yes.
Is also weird. I think I studied this one time years and years ago. It was 101 people, but now it's 102. But anyway.
Well, that's because somebody died. One or two died.
I think somebody was born.
And there was one that was born.
Yeah. I don't know how it works.
Somebody died. One fell off the ship, but they recovered.
Yeah, he was recovered.
Yep.
And then there was a baby born.
I don't remember.
By the way, just as a side note, I listened to y'all ever do anything with Hillsdale College? You ever listen to any of their?
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
They have some interesting things. They have a really good free course on the Constitution for one, by the way. Everybody should listen to that. But they had one podcast guy did on the Mayflower Compact, and these are professors, and I'll be honest, it was really boring. But I mean, there was some good information if you could just, be patient, listen to these really old guys talking. But one of the points that one of the professors made that I thought was like valid. And so you've got this group of people, this 102, 101, ever how many there were, on this boat, and they're writing this covenant between themselves and God, the Mayflower Compact. And he said you have to consider the situation that they find themselves in to decide whether or not this agreement is how important it is. And he said, keep in mind, they had just come, weeks, months even, across the ocean through terrible storms. They were on the verge of starvation, running out of food. One had died. It was bad. They hadn't landed in the right spot. And so where they were at was not one of these, greatly settled places like they should be able to. They had nothing to start with. Basically, they were in survival mode.
100%. Yep.
And so nobody on that ship was going to be able to benefit better than another during this grid. They did it on purpose to make sure we all, as one unit, could do things the right way. And he says in times of desperation like that, where you have to put aside my gain over your gain, like we're all in this together. He said it just makes it that much more pure the way they wrote it. And I just thought that was a valid point.
Absolutely.
So what does it say? Do y'all have a copy of it? It ain't that long.
I don't have a full copy. I've got most of the first part of it. I got in the name of God, amen. I think that's a good way to start.
Yeah, it is.
Whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James. So there you go. That's them showing their loyalty still to King James. I mean, because these are guys, these are Christians, and they do they believe Romans. Well, you said we need to probably look at it at some point. Romans 13:1 says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation." This is people that believe that,
Right.
and they understood that a revolt against the king would be problematic. So this was not a revolt against the king as much as it was a revolt against the church structure. So that's why you see that language there.
Yeah.
I throw 2 cents in it. They understood that an unnecessary revolt against the king, I guess, is the
Yes.
because they had in this first sentence, they put it in the right order because they mentioned in the name of God. That's our first
God
authority.
Yep.
Under the king, that's our second. And then by the grace of God, they sandwich it in. God is the one who decides where our loyalty lies. And so we're following God. And if the king, you've done this in Wednesday night, if the king is underneath that God and he's doing things the way God, then we are absolutely loyal to that dude.
And that's why you see the shift. So they've got the structure right, but that's why you see by the time of the Declaration in 1776, the king had flipped his own order.
Right.
He had put himself in God's stead, and that's what the entirety of the Declaration is all about.
Yes.
A revolt against the king that had usurped God's stead. But we're
Absolutely.
talking about the Mayflower Compact.
But at that time, it was the church. I'm going to go ahead. You're going to have to start reading the whole thing again. But Romans 13:1, the notes in the Geneva Bible, that they know that there was at least 3 Geneva Bibles on the Mayflower, 1 King James, right? Because they were already in production. People were they had the Geneva Bible. But the notes on Romans 13:1 is this. I'll read it again. "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that are to be are ordained by God." So first they say, let every, and every there. Now he distinctly shows what subjects owe to their magistrates, that is obedience, from which he shows that no man is free. And the obedience which we owe is such that is not only due to the highest magistrate himself being God, but also even to the lowest who has the office under him. So they're showing the whole structure that God sets up. And we've talked about that extensively here. But the next note that they have is every soul be subject unto the higher power. And it says, indeed, there, though an apostle, though an evangelist, though a prophet, therefore, it doesn't matter who it is, therefore the tyranny of the Pope over all kings must be thrown down to the ground. All right. And what they're showing there was the Catholic, or the Church of England, had got out of order and tried to make themselves above God, above the king. And I'm pretty much done there. So that tells you, just in the notes in the Geneva Bible, they understood Romans 13:1.
Yes.
And there was a correct order for things. And it was the Church of England who had gotten out of order. So I'm done on that.
That first sentence in the compact goes on after it talks about being, subject to the king. And the king of what? King of Great Britain, France, Ireland. And then it says king, defender of the faith. And so at one time, King James was actually defending the Bible.
That was
Yes.
his role.
That was his role.
purpose.
Yep.
That was in their mindset with the church and state. The king's one of his primary jobs was to defend the faith, not just to defend the nation and country, but to defend the faith as well.
Yeah. And so then the second sentence says, having undertaken for the glory of God, not the king,
Yep.
Yes.
for the glory and the advancement of the Christian faith,
Which faith?
the Christian one,
Oh, okay.
and the honor of our king and country. So they're doing it all. They're doing it all because of God, for God. And then if the king stays in the right spot, he's going to get honor for doing it. Does that make sense? As a leader and country, a voice to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia.
I got so it wasn't just Puritan Christians on the boat, right? We got
Correct.
these merchants
That's right.
there. But these merchant men signed this compact. Why would they sign a compact that was for the advancement of the Christian faith?
Who, the merchants?
Yeah, why would they sign a compact that says, "Yeah, we're in this to help them set up to undertake this thing for the advancement of the Christian faith"?
I don't know what you're thinking.
Because Christianity provides a set of moral standards and a moral law, and it's easier to run business if you've got a moral people. You can run business in a place that's got structure and morality a lot better than you can where there's chaos. Because where you got chaos, you got people going to vandalize your buildings, steal stuff from you, lie to you. But if you're dealing with Christians, you're dealing with honest people in an honest society. Hey, I might not be Christian, but I'll put my business around Christian people. That's my
So that actually goes along with what I was thinking. So these merchants, the guys who weren't part of it, don't forget they had just spent a long time on a boat with these folks going through a whole bunch of troubles.
Yeah, that's true.
And they could see how they acted and where they put faith. And I'm sure they were praying. And then when they get over there and they're having a disagreement about are we breaking an agreement with somebody or not, the honesty comes out in the Puritan separatist people. You're right. We need to make sure that what we're going to do next, we need to have something written down so they know that we made every effort to honor our agreements, because we don't want to be dishonest people. We want to be able to be trusted. And if you're a merchant and you see not only how the people act in times of trouble, and then they turn right around and they have an opportunity where they could, well, if you guys want to keep your agreement with them, y'all go to Virginia. We're going to break ours. We're going to stay here and do our thing. They didn't do that. I mean, that's the people you can trust and get behind. And by the way, everybody signing it was voluntary.
Right.
Yeah.
They weren't forced to sign it.
Nope.
Anyway, it keeps on going. So they're going to set up the first colony in Virginia.
Go ahead and read the whole thing.
All right. Should I start at the beginning and read it again? All right. Just keep going. Do by these present solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one another covenant, and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the end aforesaid. And what that end aforesaid was to make sure God got first and we honored the king and country pretty much. And by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and officers from time to time as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony. It's for the people. And then I highlighted this because this is important. Unto which we promise all due submission and ordinance. What is he submitting to? The colony.
Ask the question. What?
So he's talking about they're going to set up, they're going to join and make a body. They're going to form a little body of politics. Call it a little bitty government right there on the boat.
It says by the people, for the people.
Yeah, and they're going to do it so they can set up ordinances and further things. They need to make laws. They want to make sure they're doing things right. Constitutions that are going to be necessary, not just for fun, but they need to be necessary to meet and be convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience.
Yeah, that's
the colony.
To the colony.
Submission and obedience. Anyway, sorry.
Again, of the people, for the people, by the people. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And witness. Go ahead.
No, that's all I had.
That was it.
That was the end of it. Of course, then you got the in witness whereof here and to subscribed, Cape
We
Cod.
don't need to read all that
That's
stuff,
just the signature page.
Right.
So they go to establish a new settlement. They get blown off course. They're going to establish a new settlement anyway, but they realize we need to have some type of civic body, a government. And so they write this compact so they can understand how that's going to run. And in an effort to make sure that everybody, not just a few, but everybody is for their greater good of the colony, they make this covenant. Everything we do, we're going to keep in mind that the people are actually the ones that are in control. A majority rule, so to speak.
Yeah, that was a majority rule. Or a majority model, I think is what they call it, something like
Yeah.
that.
And the plan was to go to Virginia, but like you said, they got off course and wound up in Massachusetts, and the likelihood of you finding a landing at a place that has any kind of English settlers there is almost impossible.
But it happened, didn't it?
They didn't find English settlers. They found natives. They found a group of natives, and one of those natives miraculously
could speak English.
We call him Squanto, but he had been, I think he had been kidnapped when he was a kid or something like that, and been taken and raised by, bought by monks and raised by monks and educated by some. He knew English and somehow made his way back to America, and somehow the Mayflower, those on the Mayflower, are, we'll say, divinely guided, even off course. They're divinely guided to a place where Squanto's, I think it was either one of their, they got like a summer and winter type locations that they were at, and they wound up at one of those locations, and Squanto was there to interact with them. Could have met some that couldn't speak English and were not very hospitable.
Right, no welcome mat.
Yeah, because America was chaotic. Native Americans weren't a unified body at all. Native Americans killed other Native Americans. There were some. I mean, if you look into some of the history of Native Americans, some of them would get bored, and just because they were bored, they would go and slaughter other Native American villages.
Yep. They weren't very civilized.
They were not civilized at all.
I'm not saying that in an ugly way. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's just the truth.
So that's how they get here, and they set that up. That's pretty awesome.
But how would the modern day schools have their students understand this?
Did they ever talk about it in school?
Honestly,
I mean, I don't remember because I didn't pay attention. But
what probably happened in school, it was, all right, y'all need to remember this for the end of year exam.
Mayflower Covenant, 1620.
Yeah, Mayflower Compact, 1620. That's when a group of settlers came over here from
a group of rebels.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting at. A group of rebels came over here.
Probably not,
and they took the Indians' land.
They probably wasn't shared like that during our day, but
right.
Now that's probably
that's what I'm
shared.
getting at.
Yeah.
Yep.
We took somebody's land.
They don't teach the correct history, and that way they can rewrite it.
So it was I don't know, I just wrote down some thoughts as I was reading through the covenant thing. So you got, if you read the compact, I keep calling it a covenant, but it is a covenant, right? I mean, that's biblical because they had covenants then anyway. So they're making a covenant between themselves and God. That's what it comes down to. They're following a biblical principle as they write this, just like our other founding fathers did with the Constitution, all the documents. So the first one says, I just put, the government was based on consent, not force. That's how these people are setting it up. They all voluntarily signed on to form a civic body of politics. They didn't have to do it, right? The people on this boat, they voluntarily decided we're going to form it, but we're going to make sure that it was all for consent. And that means the authority that they were basically giving themselves came from themselves, because it's the people, right?
Yep.
This is the very primitive, very start. It was not imposed by a king or a noble or any outside governor. These people, these settlers, decided that they were going to be the ones in charge, and this is how they were going to make the order. And it was basically voluntary government. Then the government that they were establishing could not claim unlimited power. It had to be for the good of the colony, because that's where the power came from. It only had the power to do what the colonists gave it the power to do.
Right.
And then the other phrase I had in there says laws had to serve the general good. And these offices, I guess, that they were creating, this government, they were created for the general good of the colony. It kept these leaders from ruling for personal gain. I'm just trying to do a comparison to where we've ended up right now. You know what I mean? So we got people in government right now that are there for personal gain. They could care less about the good of the citizens.
Well, it became that later. It became gain for the king, and that's where everything changed.
Well,
later.
it did. Yeah, that's right.
Brought on the revolution. But anyhow,
they had a majority rule for the leaders. Decisions were made by the majority of the people. It meant the leaders couldn't just dictate what was going to happen next. And then the biggest thing was it was an accountability before God, because it was made in the presence of God. This is a covenant we're making with God in the name of God. And so it was very much a religious agreement and a government. Anyway.
Yeah, and that religious agreement is what promoted and probably is what lended to the success of the colony. Because the Mayflower, those that came over to Mayflower, that's not the first people that tried to colonize America. I think in the early 1600s, like 1607, a group came over to try to settle at Jamestown, and I think there was 500 settlers. 440 of them died the first year. That's unsuccessful. They didn't have a compact that said for the advancement of the Christian faith either. Right. But those that came over on the Mayflower, that Plymouth colony, they did do a whole lot better than those early settlers in Jamestown, and were able to celebrate that very next year alongside the Native Americans in that first Thanksgiving.
That had to be a help too. You can't turn that away either. The natives helped success.
Yeah, it's almost as though those other colonies come up here, we're going to do it on our own.
Yes. Yep.
Mayflower come up here, we're going to do it with God, and God led them to Native Americans that were hospitable, and with that sort of help, was able to be successful.
And I love whenever Rush Limbaugh used to read the real story of Thanksgiving every year.
Yeah. Rush Verveer.
Yeah.
Rush Verveer stuff.
Yeah.
You know how many slaves were on the Mayflower?
How many?
0.
Oh, man.
To a degree, they were.
Indentured servants.
Ones that had an agreement with the merchants.
Indentured servants, but they were not bought and paid for. It's like
Right.
those were people that put themselves under.
Yeah, they put themselves into bondage with
into servitude,
which was very common, and it was called slavery.
Yeah, but it's not. It is not Southern slavery it's not African slaves that were brought over here. Now there were slaves in here at that time. They were brought here by England from Africa, but none on the Mayflower.
So that's 1620-ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when, yeah.
And so it's like 100 years later then.
What, 1776?
Sometime around 70s. Things started to get a little wampus.
Yep. When the king became a tyrant.
What else y'all got on the Mayflower Compact? That's interesting stuff, though, man. No, this is how it all began.
I would just say that that first Thanksgiving, 1 year later. Hey, you got to think, man. They arrived, I think, in November. Is that right?
I don't know, but yeah, that sounds good.
I think they arrived here in November, get here just in time for wintertime.
Uh-huh.
And they survived. They made it that first year. And when they had that first Thanksgiving, they had that same Thanksgiving for the same reason I said they left England in the first place. And that was because they loved and honored God.
Mm-hmm.
They loved and honored God. That's why they separated themselves from the Church of England. They loved and honored God. That's why they came over here on that boat to make themselves a society where they could love and honor God. They had that first Thanksgiving because they loved and honored God. And 150 years later, they rebelled against a tyrant because they loved and honored God. It was all about loving and honoring God. And what God is that? Well, the Mayflower Compact tells us whoever the God of the Christian faith is, and that is Jesus Christ.
So I found this little note here too. It gave sort of a timeline of the people trying to connect a biblical worldview with the way America was founded. That's what I was trying to set up. So you have John Calvin, which we've talked about for a while. He says you have to obey, but magistrates must resist. That was his standpoint. It was the institution of the Christian. It's in a book he wrote, Institution of the Christian Religion. Ordinary citizens should obey rulers, even unjust ones, because government is ordained by God. That's what he thought. And then he said, however, lesser magistrates, that is, we've done a whole study of the lesser magistrates. They had the duty to resist higher rulers if they became tyrannical. Okay? So he was close. I mean, he was really close. Even if they're unjust ones, I think that's where his flaw was in the way he was thinking. But this gave birth to the doctrine of the lesser magistrates, which we've read a book about that and tried to do it on here once before. Have you ever read that book, Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates?
I don't know that I have.
I got a copy of it. That's actually an interesting book.
I think Calvin was on top of it because he experienced it for himself.
Yeah,
He was part of it, yeah.
And then you had, so that was 1509 to 1564. Dude, he was a long time ago, wasn't it? Then you had the Puritans and the Separatists, which we just talked about. These pilgrims, whatever, that came over with the Mayflower Compact. And they believed in a covenant theology. People voluntarily covenant under God to form both church and civil governments. We were going to do it under God. And if rulers broke the covenant by violating God's law, the people were released from their obedience. These people are getting back on. They're getting that the flaw that was in Calvin, which even if they're unjust, you're supposed to be obedient even if they're unjust. They're saying, no, if they break God's law, we're released from that authority that we've given them over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, ought to obey God.
Ought to obey God rather than men. That's right. So government is a covenant, and if broken, the people may resist. That's their bottom line. And then you had this dude named Samuel Rutherford, which I don't know a lot about him, 1600 to 1661. And he says law is king, not the king. And basically he's saying that the law of God is above the king. That is absolutely true. Yeah. Right. If the king becomes a tyrant, if he's breaking the covenant with his people and with God, then if he violates this, he loses his authority.
I think people need to realize that's what our Bill of Rights is.
That's what the Bill of Rights is. Yep. And so then you fast forward a little bit to American, our founders in 1776, and Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. He starts echoing everything from Calvinists through the Puritans through this Rutherford guy. Like I say, Calvin, he had a couple of things that were, they were solid, but he had one or two things off. And the Puritans sort of, we see that flaw, so here it is. And then you got this Rutherford guy. God is the one that we should obey no matter what. And that's what happened to Jefferson. He took all of those things. Government exists to protect God-given rights. Think about that for a second. That is the only reason that we needed it. These people that did the Mayflower Compact, they understood we have to do something. But I read just one little thing in the Federalist letters as I was reading it, which I thought was interesting. Where they're talking about this is government. Really, in no form can we get it right because we're a very imperfect people. But in order for protecting those rights that are given to us by God, we had to have something. But if that government becomes destructive to those rights, it's the right of the people, not only the right, but the duty of the people to abolish it. Right? And so it used to be back in that time, in the 1700s, pastors would preach this from the pulpit. This doctrine of the authority of God, and should a government get out from under what God asked us to do, it was our responsibility to correct it as the people. The people themselves under God retain final authority to replace any abusive rulers. That's what they said in American 1776. That was their stance. The people themselves under God's authority retain the final authority to replace abusive rulers.
Everything about our founding documents, including the Mayflower Compact and the Federalist Papers and all of those writings, there's this theme that continues across, and that is that there is a God of this universe, and that God is not the government, that God is not the king, that God is not the president, it's not anything. That God is the creator of the universe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that government, any king, any president, any citizen are accountable to him.
Mm-hmm.
Not the other way around, or the separation of no God at all. Even the writer said it. I think it was, I don't know, one of them early founding fathers said that even the government we have here is only works with a just and moral people, a God-fearing people.
Yes.
You take God out of the picture, then none of it works.
It's the judges. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes, and it's chaos, moral relativism, total chaos.
And I'd argue with you on the King's List and the Federalist Papers too, along with that Jesus Christ is the King.
He is.
So
Yeah.
that's the way America saw it.
Yeah.
He's our king.
When you read all of that, their theme was no king but Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And the amount of time that they spent in those Federalist Papers, there's websites you can read it to make sure. I mean, just one statement. When they're setting up, right now they're in the process of brainstorming how this would work. I was telling y'all earlier, so I'll tell these folks. They had this, what was his name? Not John Madison, James Madison.
James
That's
Madison.
history buff over here, right? James Madison, who had a great mind and was thinking through all these things, understanding there was a necessity to put something in position to be able to protect these rights, because as the people grow, you know what I mean? It's hard for everyone to be in one place at one time. Anyway, he was understanding that it was, and he knew that people were flawed, and so that it could never be exactly perfect, but it was nevertheless, it was something necessary to a lesser of evil, or in order to protect the greater good, not the perfect good, but the greater good. And he used an analogy of like a fine metal, gold, being the representing like the citizens. And in order to make it stronger, you do have to put a little bit of alloy in it to make that metal stronger. And he said, but if you put too much in it, then you lose the value of the gold, right? It's overpowering it. So you always need to make it just enough, but not too much. In fact, just keep it as small as possible, the smallest amount. And as they're doing it, he says this, he says, they'll see, therefore, in all cases where power is to be conferred, these people are going to be giving power to a certain smaller group in order to make sure that we can protect our rights under God. But all these places where power is conferred, the point first to be decided is whether such a power be necessary to the public good.
Mm.
That sounded a whole lot like the compact, did it?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not necessary, don't do it. Fast forward 300 years almost 300 years. And you got a man in the office right now that's like, we don't really need this. Let's just use the Department of Education. That's not necessary for the greater good. We got states. So let's just get rid of it. And someone trying to trim government down, make it smaller to get that alloy back to an amount that the gold is worth more to people.
Right. Yep.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's interesting stuff.
It is.
I wish history would have been more fun in high school for me.
It's only fun when you have to vote.
Yeah.
You need it now. I need to know this stuff.
Yeah.
You got too many voters out there that don't know it. Uninformed, uneducated, or misinformed, maybe I should say.
So I know all about the uneducated, so I'll just give you an epiphany that I had this week. I mean, I'd heard of the Federalist Papers, and I had even done like searches, just looking for different things, and you could see quotes and stuff out of them, and it was always interesting. But I found a site that had them all at one place. There's a lot.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like this planning process to be able to set up a Declaration of Independence and a government for America was not something that happened in like 2 or 3 letters at all willy-nilly. These guys thought about everything.
And they were super intelligent.
Oh, man. They saw the problems that were going on with the way government's been. Like you had mentioned, they were traveling all over. How are you doing yours? How are you doing yours? Oh, that's working. That's not working. Let's just modify everything. Man.
It wasn't haphazard.
No.
And then they had the Constitutional Convention that met for I don't know how long, months and months, years.
Yeah.
And just a side note, when there was one meeting close to the end when they were still trying to get it formulated, and there was tremendous amounts of disagreement and arguing back and forth. And one guy stepped up and said, when we first had, basically, I'll summarize. He said, basically, when we first started having these meetings, we prayed to God. And he was directing those meetings. And now we seem to have abandoned God, and we need to get back to, maybe we should start praying to God and see if we get things going back the right way. The one that said that is the one that the left and atheists and everything else prop up as the prototype for why we're not a Christian nation. And that was Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin he wasn't really a Christian. They say he wasn't really a godly man or anything like that, but he's the one that stepped up, probably the least likely candidate. He steps up and says, hey, we need to start praying. If we're going to get this thing right, we need to get back to the beginning. We need to get back to how we started, and that is seeking God's face. I think that speaks volumes to the start of our nation and our origins and where we should be today.
And even if he wasn't a very religious man, he was a genius. Obviously, we can all agree with that, right?
Yeah.
And the man recognized what the difference was and what was working and what was not working. And it's what they got away from God. That's a
and he
fabulous
did.
point.
He held the Bible still in high regard.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I ain't got nothing else. Y'all good to go?
Just make sure that listeners do not perish from a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Learn, study, get off social media, and get into a book. Open a book sometime.
Yeah.
I just heard Reading Rainbow theme song.
It's in a book.
Reading Rainbow.
There is a calculated effort for you not to know.
Yes.
You're exactly right.
What was that guy's name? He used to always say, you don't have to take my word for it. Right? You don't have to take our word for it.
That's right.
Read it. It's there. Hurry up before they get rid of all of it, right?
That's right.
Hurry up before they destroy it. All right. Well, we appreciate y'all. We're out, folks. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Legal Logic Podcast. We hope something we said this week has made you think. Hope it's encouraged you to go take a look for yourself. Don't take our word for it. You can read it yourself in a book. That was the beauty of writing these things down, to preserve them. That's why we have a written word of God, so we can always refer back to it. It's a tough world to be able to find truth, so if you need some help in that journey on the search for truth, I invite you to check out our website, leagueoflogic.com. It's leagueoflogic.com, and on that site you can find some study tools to help you along this journey. Also, check us out on the social media platforms, Truth Social, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now, Rumble, YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, follow, whatever you got to do to keep up with the channel and help us get the word out would be greatly appreciated. Also, send us some questions and comments from that website, too. Give us a topic. We've got a couple coming up, but if you got something to follow up on this, we would love to discuss it. Hope you guys have a great week, and we look forward to you tuning in on the next episode.